Bruce Campbell comes from a different perspective when it comes to research for development in agriculture. He comes from the field of ecology. I think that all his degrees, from the bachelor to the PhD, was in ecology, either in Cape Town, Minnesota, and Utrecht. And you come from Africa, where you spent part of your career, but also you have worked in Indonesia and in Australia, always linking ecology and forestry. About 5-6 years ago, you decided to switch from the developing world to come to southern Scandinavia. Bruce is based in the University of Copenhagen, where he has been the director of the Climate Change, Agriculture and Food Security Program of the CGIAR. And he has a link with our university through our former rector, who is also sitting with us this morning, Thomas Roswell, who is chairing the board of this program. And I think that he will talk to what Ruben was referring, the new way of doing business in the CGIAR, opening the house. I think it's the best example of how the house has been opened by the CGIAR if I compare the 15 centers, not because he's here, but we were in Oxford some years ago trying to put the first ideas of that program in was with a strong partnership with universities, mainly from the north and few from the south who wanted to join on this new challenge to agriculture like climate change. Without much to say, Bruce, the floor is yours. I know we're in live stream, so it will be challenging to not only listen to you, but then to have the question and answer sessions.
Can you help me with the presentation?
Yeah, it's there, you see. No.
Where is it? Oh, yeah. Good. I'm going to talk about climate-smart agriculture. How do we get food security in a warmer and more extreme world? And the program is led by CIAT, and we, together with this new logo, is Future Earth. It's the global change community. I'm going to cover 3 aspects. Is it really going to be warmer and more extreme? How do we rise to those challenges? And the last part is, how do we revolutionize research? If you read certain newspapers, and if you listen to certain political parties, I shouldn't be here, or there shouldn't be a program, because here's the data. Global surface temperature is not changing. I love this graphic. It's on the web, you can see it. This is how skeptics view global warming. And this is how realists view global warming. So global warming is a serious issue. And extremes, this is the IPCC report from 2012, where they look at, try and assess what's going to happen in terms of extremes, severity and frequency of extremes. More warm spells, droughts, heavy rainfall, local flooding, extreme coastal water, high water levels, and that means saline soils. These are not easy things to study. There's a lot of uncertainty around them, but there's enough on the table showing that this is happening. And perhaps there's some skeptics about climate science, too much uncertainty. Surely you believe the private sector, and the biggest sector to be hit by climate change is going to be insurance. So you go to Munich Re, they are taking climate change incredibly serious, have research departments looking at extreme events, for example, putting data together on insurance losses and losses related to weather-related disasters. So we have, I would say, we're definitely heading for a warmer and more extreme world. But the climate science is difficult. So we have a young researcher with us, and they've analyzed the rate of improvement in the climate models. And their prediction is they will retire before the models are good enough for agriculture. And this is Richard Washington, who's from the Global Change Community. Substantial increases in the reliability are not expected anytime soon. So there are real problems in trying to move the climate science faster. These young scientists that we've got working with us estimate that the current errors are larger than 2 degrees for temperature and 20% for precipitation in some parts of the world, which is those are major problems for maize and rice, for example. This could be 20% differences in yields. So there's lots of uncertainty. So CCAPS is working very closely with the World Climate Research Program to try and improve the models for agriculture. And in some ways, we're taking it into our own hands and we're downscaling climate models so that agriculturalists can use it. And this is a site that we have downscale data, and as you can see, there's high demand for this kind of thing. So the second part of the talk is how can we rise to those challenges? And we think that there's 4 different areas where we need work. The one is on the climate smart technologies, the practices, and having the portfolios available for farmers to adapt. The second area is on climate information services and climate-informed safety nets. The third area is on low emissions development. And the fourth area is on policies and institutions for climate-resilient food systems. And you'll notice there were 4 different logos there, and this is the new CGIAR. Only 2 of those are from the CGIAR by different centers, and 2 of them are being led from outside the system. So what is climate smart agriculture? It's the attempt to improve productivity and food security, to increase adaptive capacity, and to get mitigation happening in agriculture. And of course, one would love to get that center square of win-win-win, but that's not always possible or not always appropriate in every part of the world. So a large part of the work is looking at synergies and trade-offs and what works for different places. I've now got a few examples, and here's one from SEAT and IITA on the coffee systems in Eastern Africa. Coffee banana intercropping. So looking at understanding the technology and improving the technology. And this is a great example of a real win-win-win. Farmers can double their income. It reduces the risks of drought. It's generally a risk aversion strategy, and it puts extra carbon into the system. But at the same time, there's a whole section on policy engagement, because even some governments in the region don't allow intercropping. You have to put only coffee in place. So there's a whole policy process going on at the same time. Another example, this is from the climate science community. You can now click on your site, your farm, and you can get an idea of where you can go to vision the future climate. So one woman's present is another woman's future. And then we have farmer-to-farmer visits where we take the farmers from the one sites to the other sites to understand how you'd have to adapt. And then that leads into local adaptation planning back home and into trialing different options. So the second area is climate information services and climate-informed safety nets. So we're working with, for example, the World Food Programme, World Vision, on really the options for managing the entire food system. Better food security early warning systems, getting earlier interventions, and thinking about grain, fodder, seed banks, how to manage this whole system. So this is quite a new area for the CGIAR as well. Insurance is crucial to disasters and weather extremes, and this is an example from India where we're working with the agriculture insurance company. They already reach 12 million farmers with 40 different crops, and CCAPS is looking at the indices that trigger insurance payments. So these insurance payments happen instantaneously when the weather hits a certain threshold. So we're looking at improving the indices for the insurance products. You also need data on the weather at a very local scale. So CCAPS is working with a climate scientist how to blend satellite data with limited station data that's on the ground. Another area of work is in climate information services. This is in Mali. How do you reach farmers with seasonal forecasts and in-season forecasts about mid-season droughts? There's a South-South relationship as well, where we bring the Indian Meteorological Service into the West African situation. The third area is low emissions development. So this is looking at mitigation, and we're looking at 3 different things. Storing more carbon in the system through trees or soils, reducing land cover change as the biggest driver of deforestation and greenhouse gas emissions, and then intensification, lowering the greenhouse gas emissions per unit of food produced. Ruben talked about eco-efficiency or sustainable intensification, so there's a whole lot of work across the program on this issue. Some of the work of IITA is on cocoa intensification, where in Western Ghana they now have 56,000 hectares under an intensified system. This would have required, if you'd wanted the same kind of yield, 151,000 hectares of forest. That's 4 times more than the forest that is actually available in that area. So it indicates the kind of solutions that you can get through intensification. A real challenge in smallholder systems is that actually we don't know what the greenhouse gas emissions are in smallholder systems because of these very heterogeneous landscapes and mixed farming systems where a single farmer can be essentially having 5 different operations. And so we've put together a global consortium of different centers, different national players and international agencies looking at how to measure greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture. There's a major capacity strengthening component to that with a PhD network of students looking at greenhouse gas emissions, and they'll meet in Aarhus University across the water in a month's time. And a lot of the work is about how to do measurements differently from how we would do them in Sweden or Denmark. Low-cost equipment, how do you put samples together, those sorts of things. And then we're also working on the technologies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and perhaps you know this one. This is one of the many technologies we're working on. This is the rice alternate wetting and drying from IRI, where amazing, you can get major water reduction, and a co-benefit is you can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions without compromising yields. A lot of our work is around the incentives and the finance needed to make it happen, because if it's such a great technology, why isn't it everywhere? So there's a lot of issues on the sort of policy side. The government of Vietnam is committed to a 20% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in agriculture by 2030. So we're looking for those kinds of governments to work with in order to make sure we have these outcomes as well. So the last area of work is on policies and institutions. And I think I've just got a single slide of 3 different examples. And we don't do the kind of we're not a policy research institute sitting in a university writing papers. A lot of it is engagement. So this is really attractive, I think, to students who want to make a difference. And there's a lot of students like that in the world. So as an example, we work with the negotiators on issues holding back agriculture in the UNFCCC. In the first 2 years ago, we worked with all the global agricultural negotiators, understanding what their problems were, and then writing the papers to address those issues and having a dialogue. We're now working with the African negotiators. We're establishing a global index of countries' readiness for climate-smart agriculture, the degree to which countries are putting in place all the institutions needed to scale up essentially sustainable agriculture with a climate lens. And we also use opportunities like Nigeria has approached us. They're putting policies in place on climate-smart agriculture, so we do the policy-related work to help them put their policies in place. It's a whole team of many different nationals. So the last part of the talk is on how to revolutionize research. How do we get very different kind of research? How do we get very different kinds of development? Research-informed development. And this is led by somebody based at ICRAF. So the one thing that we do is, in all the areas that we work, and these are the 5 regions, we have science policy platforms at the national level and sometimes at the regional level, where we try and understand what the needs are from the policy audience, and we can then have also a forum for getting the results out. At the local level, we do a lot of action research with farmers and local institutions, and we've established this concept of climate-smart villages, where in a dialogue process we try and understand what is needed for that particular locality and then, together with multiple partners, use it as a learning site. But always with a vision to scaling up. So thinking about right from the start, what is the way this would get into a larger number of farmers, through policy means, private sector, or through major development initiatives. I think we've got a new approach to data, that data should go public as soon as possible. We did household surveys with 5,000 people across 3 continents. Within 6 months of the last survey, the data was public, before any of the scientists had written papers about it. Now, this is generally this is unknown, because scientists want to first write their papers before they release the data. Our hypothesis is that if we release the data fast enough, we'll get more out of it than if we hold it back for 10 years before we release it. This is one particular example of data, ag trials, where there's now 2,500 trials with 20 crops on the website from the CG centers and from other partner organizations. Another piece is focusing on gender and social differentiation. So we have budget targets for gender-related research, and we do a lot of capacity enhancement, because we've identified that, for example, women are less likely to get climate information than men. And yet, women are more important in terms of the household nutrition, and they're often more important in terms of what's happening in terms of the agricultural sector as well. So this is there's some work in South Asia, in India, one state, and in Nepal with the Ministry of Finance, where they've essentially using our gender training tools to now train thousands of women leaders in the country. And we have to communicate differently. How do we get the message of agriculture to the farmers? I could give an example about cell phones, but the one I've chosen is TV. This is fantastic. This is Kenya, where you have a farm makeover program. You know these kind of programs where you have a home makeover program and somebody comes in and changes your house? Well, they have a farm makeover program. Every week, they go to a different farm and make it over. And we've, in a partnership together with the TV company, they now use our messages in that program. Well, you'll say, this only gets to the urban population. But actually, this is now millions of viewers, and 60% are in the rural areas. So my last slide, we think that in order to tackle these problems of this warmer and more extreme world, we really need to do 4 things at once. The technologies, the climate smart technologies, and really having the options available for farmers to choose. Climate information services and safety nets, so that farmers are willing to take the risk and to use and to innovate, to try different technologies. We think we need to look at the low emissions options, and especially the incentives and the financing to make it happen. And then the policy framework to make sure everything it can happen at the field level. But above all, we really think that we need to do research in a very different way, with much targeted communication efforts, policy science dialogues, and those sorts of things. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bruce. And I understand from Misha that we will have both the auditorium as potential people who are following the live stream. So we need to coordinate on that. So now the floor is open for any comments or questions. Eric Steen. Eric Steen is our professor of agrosystems here in Halden.
Thank you very much for... Is it working? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like if you could give a few more indication about your strategy on publishing your data before the publications have been written. How has this been working so far? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we did it with some nervousness, but I think that the person who was leading it was incredibly brave. The hypothesis being that essentially we didn't have enough time to work on this voluminous data set. And in terms of the results from it, we're still waiting because this happened on our first data set that we did. This happened, I think it was last year, at the start of last year. But we know that it's been downloaded, that particular data set has been downloaded many times, like something like 1,000 times probably by students. Within the system, you have to write in who you are and what you plan to do it, and there's statements about using the data. So I would say it's a little bit early to assess whether it's going to work or not, but we're still very hopeful that it's a positive way forward. That was just with the household data. We're also doing it with this trial data and with the climate data as well. So there's a whole series of different portals for the data. There was some reluctance from many scientists at the start, but I think that they are now buying into it as well.
I have heard also very good experience from this. Oh, here it is. Yes, I also heard from other sites that that scientists having this reluctance actually realized if they make their data sets open to others, they will have much more publications, joint publications.
Yeah. And I should say that has happened as well, is that the person driving that has then been invited by many of the groups writing the work to join the authorship. Yeah. So the microphone is working. It's needed so that it can be live streamed.
I see. Thank you. Actually, I have the same question with the previous question about the data sharing, but I will change my question into how a university can engage with the program that you lead, Bruce, with CCA Apps. Should we work on the particular research agenda or writing proposal and so on? So what is the opportunity for students to engage with the research that you are leading with? Thanks.
So I presented the 4 themes, and we've also got 5 regional program leaders in those 5 regions that I showed you, and they are the key drivers of the action on the ground. So it's really starting the dialogue with those sorts of people to see where the possibilities are. And of course, you can start some of the dialogue with me, and then I can point you in the right direction. There are many collaborations already happening around the globe, and I mean, we're here in Sweden today to try and stimulate that kind of thing with the Swedish university as well.
Thank you, both of you, for 2 very inspiring talks. I have been making a reflection about partnership. It was first mentioned emphasized strongly the partnership between universities and institutes. Mm-hmm. And now in the latter part of your talk, Bruce, I also hear partnership between scientists and actors in different ways. And I want to ask my questions relating back to one of the first challenges mentioned by the first speaker about the weak institutions that are often making it difficult to have a strong sustainable development because there are so many other challenges for humans' lives and getting the knowledge into action. Maybe it's a question for both of you. How can research institutes and universities try to assist in developing a partnership with institutional frameworks or organizations to strengthen, many ways humans' livelihoods?
Mm-hmm. I can have a first go, and perhaps Ruben may want to add something. So Ruben has mentioned that a lot of our work is focusing on achieving outcomes and impacts on the ground, and therefore institutions are really crucial to make that happen. So we go through a process of trying to map our outcomes and developing theories of change, how things are going to happen. And it's really clear that the most important piece of that theory of change is partnerships. often with not only partnerships with researchers at the start, but partnerships with policymakers, partnerships with farmers' organizations, private sector. So we really have to take these partnerships incredibly serious if we're going to have outcomes. As an example, at our coordinating unit, there's only 3 of us. So we're really small in Denmark. And one of those persons, we've allocated them to go to the International Fund for Agricultural Development for 4 months of the year. So it's a major loss of time in terms of coordination. But they are going into an organization which has $1 billion investment in rural development. And we're trying to understand where we need to work as scientists in order to influence that kind of agenda. So this taking the partnerships is really important. The other part that is also crucial on the theory of change is the capacity strengthening. Back to your issue, is so that if you're really going to get a change in country X, and you really need the extension services behind you, then there's a major role for you to make sure that it's going to happen, because otherwise you won't get the outcomes. So we also identify all the areas where we need capacity strengthening, and then we work strongly with those agencies. I'll give you an example of the UNFCCC. In many cases, the negotiators on agriculture come from ministries of environment, and therefore the agricultural knowledge is not that great. And so we've been working with the negotiators to improve their understanding of the agricultural issues related to the UNFCCC. And this has helped a lot in improving the debate at the global level, because then people can really tackle the agricultural issues. So I think right from down the local institutions up to the top, one really has to take it very seriously, and it has to become part of the research process.
So if I may add one more, cannot resist the temptation to add one more point. I give you an example of what I mean by weak. We are pushed. Well, first of all, let me always start with the positive. We have always had partnerships. So we are not inventing partnerships now. From the very beginning, the Green Revolution was a partnership between India and a few others, and so on and so on. So all the partnerships. Now, we've been asked by our donors to say, show me your partners. So we usually put a long list of partners, which are mainly paper partners. I'm sorry to be so frank. They're paper partners, because you cannot have 1,000 partners. I mean, you cannot sleep. I mean, how you can have 100 partners? So what we were saying, I give you an example of what I mean by weak partnerships. There are 34 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, and there are 4 public systems, agricultural research systems, which are okay. How about the other 30? What do we do with the other 30? This is what we mean when we say you need to partner to have those challenges, and the funding for us comes if you partner. So I'm saying you need 2 to tango. I'm coming from a country that dances tango. So what are our partners? Oh, you need to build them. Sure, we need to build them, but so this is the weakness, institutional weakness that I mean. So I'm not coming back to say you need all this public sector, Soviet-style, central planning. Not at all. Not at all. I love NGOs and civil society. I think those are the partners of the future too. But I mean, without the public, you need to have there are market failures. So not everything can be done by Monsanto, right? So you have to have some public institutional mindset for public universities. I'm not talking about public institutes. So that's the missing link in the partnership that we are talking about. And that's why we are struggling, and you always are getting some gray hair too, in the partnership business. Because when you say, the partners are here in Europe, very strong, and in the US, and in some other countries. But if you look at the developing world, that's the missing link, the public system in the developing world. When I was in Washington, the famous Washington Consensus, although I lived there for 15 years, I never saw any consensus. But the Washington Consensus said, privatize. There are alternative providers. The extension public system, privatize. All of this, privatize. So nothing was privatized. So that's the weak link. The good news is that these programs, like CCAPS, is much more open than before. So the openness of those programs is not because the CGIAR program, this is not a CGIAR program. I mean, we call it CGIAR program, but in reality, you should be in the program and the rest. So there's much more open windows to partner. So you have a network that we don't have in the CGIAR. You have the network of your students. I always remember the university that gave me a PhD. I will always remember that, and I will go to Minnesota as many times as I can go. That's a key issue that you should, I think, the university, all professors know this very well. You got your students when they go out. So instead of letting them go, perhaps there's a network there to be built. And we are trying to do the same. If we join those two networks, I think we win.
Okay. Any more questions? We're just approaching the end of the seminar session. Any final comments? If not, then I will just take the opportunity again to thank our colleagues from the CGIAR. This was a delegation of 4 of you coming today, not only Ruben and Bruce, who gave the seminars, but also Thomas and Misha, who are behind the scenes trying to make things happen. I also thank all of you for coming. I was explaining to our visitor that seminar on Friday mornings out of schedule sometimes is difficult to get people together, but I'm happy to see some of you around. And also we have the advantage of have the live stream for some people who have been following us from different parts of the world. As I understand, it was broadcast through internet. So without more, thank you again. Have a good lunch. Good talk. Good.